Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Freemium Mode, the stream where we give you all bits of advice and insight related to B2B marketing within the video game industry. It's a special one today. I've got the founder of BGM here, James, who will be speaking to me about all things related to measurement and evaluation. As always, this is a stream, so if you do have any questions, comments, please feel free to add them into the chat and we will get to them if we have time. There is a slight delay, so bear with us if there's nothing that comes through immediately. We will be kind of being notified, especially by Tamsin, who is diligently monitoring the channels as we speak. But yeah, hi James, how are you doing? I know it sounds weird.
I'm good, Max. I was then talking to you a few minutes ago, but let's pretend we haven't spoken.
Yeah.
I'm great, Max. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. But no, this is obviously something that we speak about a lot here at BGM internally. We speak about it with clients, and I think it's actually a really interesting conversation to be having, especially when we face potentially like a lack of understanding or various different perceptions of what good looks like when you do marketing within the games industry. And I guess that we'll go into that as we go through the conversation. So, as we always do, we have a collection of questions that we often get asked that are condensed here to fuel this conversation. And I'm going to kick off straight away with perhaps the one that a lot of people ask, even if they don't ask it in this way. But why do so many B2B games providers resist properly evaluating their marketing? I think it's something that we face a lot, and we wonder why. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that, James?
I don't think, to be fair, that they're actively resisting measuring. I just think it's going to sound really patronising. I don't mean it to. They don't know what they don't know a lot of the time. So I think it's up to us as an agency to show them the value of correct measurement and try and tie it into what they're looking to achieve. But certainly, I don't think it's necessarily a case that people are saying I don't want to measure it. I think they want to measure, but we'll go into it more on this. They're probably measuring the wrong things or putting value on the incorrect things, really.
Yeah. And is there something related to also like the size and scale of a lot of businesses within this like very narrow stream of the games industry in terms of like what they have at their capabilities to properly measure marketing activities? Would you say that's also an element of it?
Yeah, I mean, once again, to dangle a carrot, we'll certainly be covering this off later when it comes to free tools and paid for tools for measurement. I think we'll hopefully cover that later. Look, I think budget plays a significant part, or company size. I think in a larger company, it's not always true. You're going to get people who know what they're looking for and are experienced in measurement and metrics, and they're going to direct it more. I think the financial aspect usually comes with a bigger company, and that's when you may need to spend money to employ certain tools that are going to do two things, basically. One set of tools are going to measure. It sounds obvious.
Yeah.
The other ones, and once again, we'll talk about it more later, are going to join the dots. So they are going to connect your activity here with your business outcome here, or they should do that. So we'll definitely cover that one off. I don't want to go too deep into it now and drive it off into a segue.
No, that's absolutely fine. But I do think it's an interesting one because it's obviously, as you said, it might not be down to people not wanting to, but they might not be prioritizing it, or they might not have the budget or capabilities to do it as much as they'd like. And so then it might be a lower priority as a result. And I guess that leads us on to our kind of next question is in that case, what is being missed out if people aren't correctly measuring their marketing efforts in that type of way?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a pretty short answer for this one. I mean, the phrase has been misattributed to Einstein, but it's basically something along the lines of, I've written it down here so I don't get it wrong, so that's why I'm looking down. It's quote, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that really goes for any marketing campaign. It just seems really weird to just keep doing something, and then at the end of it, you're going, what did that achieve? Or if you're not measuring it, you don't know how to adjust it in order to get the outcome that you want.
Yeah. And would you also say that, like, within that there's a certain degree of people look like relying on things that they just feel, like the gut feel related to PR marketing over anything that's actually measurable and trackable in that way? There's almost like people just feel things are doing the right way over actually having any quantifiable data behind it.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie here. For years, people have almost rightly thought PR is fluffy. It's a
Mm.
fluffy, people perceive it as a fluffy, unaccountable discipline. And to be fair, there's lots of really good people on initiatives, which once again we'll get to in due course, that have sought to put some kind of measurement framework around, PR and marketing activity. So I definitely think that uh, gut feel really isn't good enough, and
Mm.
that companies should have at least some basic basic metrics in place and not so much rely on their gut feeling. Because then ultimately, especially if you're working with an agency like us, what are you really doing after 3 or 6 months? Like, once again, it's up to us to do a lot of that heavy lifting for the client, but there's information the client needs to give us as well for us to see the outcomes. Um, so that's it really, is no, gut feel, not good enough.
It's really interesting though, but you talk about the basic metrics, and I think anyone who has even just entertained a conversation within a PR or marketing agency often thinks
Mm,
about a few that come to mind, and those often come down to related to coverage, and so circulation coverage numbers. I don't know whether you want to have a moment to talk about AVE, which I know is always a contentious topic, but we can talk about that.
yeah.
Like, for those people who are just going, well, yeah, like, I want to make sure that we're getting the most amount of coverage, like X amount of pieces of coverage a week, or this amount of
Mm,
circulation figures or reach, or whatever you want to call it. Like, is that
mm.
enough? Like, I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I think it's a common question that we do get from people who are looking to measure their work.
Try not to get ranty on this one. Um, Look, I say the same thing to everybody I ever speak to about B2B, specifically within the games industry, but it probably applies to a lot of other verticals as well. If you predicate your campaigns upon purely driving ongoing media coverage month in month, especially working with an agency, you're going to fire them after
Mm.
3 months. Especially in the games industry, right? Most people only care about less than 10 publications that they really want to get into. MCV Develop, GI.biz, GamesBeat, Pocket Game Biz. And there's obviously like Mashable, VentureBeat, Fast Company, all of the kind of the big American sort of business publications that are tougher to get into, but it's achievable. But certainly ongoing obsession media coverage is not a good strategy in any case. Media coverage is really important, obviously, because that's what is at the heart of PR. And going back to metrics, the media coverage for metrics are great if you can link it to something or an outcome, which once again I'll go into in more detail. But just going back to a campaign based on media coverage, that shouldn't be the case. I talk a lot about the PESO model developed by Ginny Dietrich, PESO, not the currency. Stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned. And so earned coverage, media coverage will fall into the earned category. But if you're having a fully fleshed out B2B, what we would call a multi-channel or omni-channel strategy, media is really important, but the other parts of what's in the PESO model, that if anyone listening to this can just look it up, you can see it's a diagram, like it's like a Venn diagram with four intersecting circles on it.
Yeah.
And it's largely what we base our work on.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, and obviously post this stream, we will be uploading this video to YouTube. We'll include a link to the necessary materials that can be speak, because there's going to be a lot of them. As me and James are prepping for this episode, there's going to be a lot of resources that we'd want to be sharing, so they'll all be included in the final recording.
Yeah, whatever I name, I'm gonna have
we'll make sure they're all listed in.
We'll make sure the links. Yeah, we'll make sure the links are underneath.
But I do think it's also an interesting point from a perspective also on coverage, that often, because the pool of media is so small, it's sometimes putting yourself in their shoes and recognize that even if you're doing the most amazing things as a company in the industry, they're under an obligation to not just be writing about you every single week, every single day. There's got to be a need of diversity on their side. And so even if you are doing amazing stuff, you're not going to be able to guarantee being in those publications every single week, because it's just not how the publications themselves will work. So I think it's a really interesting conversation, and it's important, like you said, an important element of it, but not necessarily. So with that in mind, it kind of ties nicely to our next question on the stocks, which is, how do agencies and clients create a framework for tracking and measuring their campaigns? If it's not just coverage numbers and circulations, what do you do?
So I alluded before to the fact that people have been trying to develop a framework or some kind of accountability. At its sort of highest level, I suppose, you have what's called AMEC, AMEC, although I'm not sure what AMEC acronym. I can't remember what AMEC actually stands for. I should know. Shame on me. But if you go to the AMEC website, which we'll link to, there's a lot of resources on there. But effectively, it's based on something called the Barcelona Principles, which was when a group of smart people got together and thought, right, we're sick of PR being fluffy and unaccountable. Let's try and do something. So the AMEC website's got a really good tool where you can actually go in and you can fill it in. And it's all to do with basically setting realistic, measurable outcomes for a PR campaign. Something that you think isn't vanity metrics, but something that you could affect, whether that's inbound leads to website, or it's amount of coverage or number of sales or whatever it is. But I think at its highest level, you've got something like AMEC, but I think AMEC can be quite intimidating for some agencies, and certainly for companies that may not have an agency. Having a framework like that may be too difficult, maybe too much. In that instance, if you go, there you go. Thanks, Steph. It stands for the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communication. And Steph's one of the board members. Thank you, Steph. Just got that on the side. I've hopefully said nice things.
Visibility. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But look, AMEC's not for everyone. It does involve a compliant client, and it involves you to be highly disciplined. I think, just going back to what I was saying, you can therefore take a basic set of metrics, and as long as you've got things that you, as us an agency, and we agree with the client, or the client feels are important, valuable, trackable metrics, and they could be 3 things, they could be 5 things. That's something that can be tracked over time, and it can be modified. But I still think for individual piece of outreach in a campaign, it's good just to set expectations as to like what may come of it and where it may lead.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
I will go. I think we're probably going to cover it later. Sorry, but I'll go into the specific metrics for that can be tracked. I didn't want to jump the gun now.
No, it's a free flow. We have these questions, but we might be bouncing back and forth between different responses. So no, I think it's a really good point. And it also ties that whole point on expectations is a really valid one. Often, I think everyone, when they started their career in PR, probably has a memory of someone promising the client a certain piece of coverage or certain result, and then it's up to someone who's very junior to do that. So that collective managing of expectations is really important. And definitely, like in our kind of current marketplace, when we're always having to deliver them the best we can, but with a smaller pool of media that's probably owned by big organizations underneath, so they're all connected in that way. It's very important. I'm going to go to a conversation that I know you're always passionate to talk about as well, and it's a part of what we're always analysing and looking at here to see its value and its worth, is when we look at AI's impact within the measurement and valuation space. You know, coming from an old school, like B2B tech, not just games, I used to work with a lot of clients who were like, AI is great at looking at a lot of data and coming to some conclusions and the value that hold of AI. And now that it's so prolific with these platforms, you know, what do you see its use is within the type of the world of measurement and evaluation?
Yeah, I mean, look, as much as I love AI, I know it's going through a bit of a negative period at the moment that it's not delivering on financially for most of the people that have invested in it. I think you know there's a lot of interesting conversations within PR and marketing, especially I know PR Moment, the trade site, have done workshops on AI and using AI and AI within measurement. Look, I think the important thing to say is that AI is not scraping the internet, right? It's not doing real time stuff, so it can't give you as much you think it's going to give. I think the primary benefit that I've seen from AI is, I think, is what you said basically, which is measuring large data sets or making sense of something. So from a PR and measurement perspective, you know, you can just feed in a spreadsheet and literally ask ChatGPT, for argument's sake, like, give me some highlights, give me some trends, give me some charts. You know, you can inquire as to anything or any insight. If you feed in piece of press coverage, you can ask it to do sentiment analysis. Now they are expensive because we've subscribed to them, but tools like Meltwater and Muckrack that we've used historically, they will give you sentiment analysis on pieces of coverage, so you don't need to use AI yourself to do that, and it's doing it in real time rather than you just feeding piece of information in. And the other thing that AI can be really good for as well is just asking it for advice and help on how to measure the effectiveness of PR and marketing campaigns. Like if you go in and just ask it, it'll spit out a huge amount of really, you know, really interesting things. But I think AI is just being built into a lot of the tools that us are an agency that we're using. So more and more, it's just augmenting the things that we're using on behalf of our clients. But I appreciate that we're paying subscriptions and money that may be out of the reach of certain people, but at least clients can feel happy that the AI that is being worked on by these companies is going to sort of manifest within the tools that we're using. But yeah, look, that's kind of my feeling on where I think AI is at the moment. It's just certainly not the panacea or the be all and end all.
No, but I think it goes back to that date. Like, you know, if you have a huge spreadsheet of, you know, even if it's just your client's coverage numbers or metrics or inbound leads, it's sometimes you won't necessarily identify the trends that an AI can, especially if the data is logged properly. And it's up to you to decide how you want to use that data and what data is actually true or erroneous and stuff like that. Which, again, this might seem my pivoting here. I'm very proud of it. It ties to our next question, which is, you know, what is good data versus data that may hold less value?
Yeah.
I don't want to say bad data because I don't, you know, I think that's very subjective. But, you know, when we're looking at the data side of things, what is useful and what is less useful?
Yeah, I mean, look, all data's good data, so it's a good start. I think that I think a really good starting point for anyone here, we'll put a link, is the Ginny Dietrich. I mentioned her earlier. You know, she created the Pesto model. She did a really good course with Muckrack, and it's free. All the fundamentals of PR measurement, and it's really good. It takes about 2 hours, and what she does is that she effectively segments your potential data sets into 2 buckets. So bucket one is what she calls, I'm not going to claim it's me saying this, feel good metrics. And she even posits that these are things you don't even have to share with the client, right? Like they're just things for you to check in to know things are going in the right direction. But I would say a lot of the time we would want to share these with clients. And that's things that are typically use a lot of free tools to get this. So that's things like website impressions, backlinks, which we can go into in a minute, which is really important. Like I'd say backlinks are the main value of probably a PR agency for a client for SEO value. Coverage impressions, our friends at Coverage Book, who I'll give a shout out to as well. We use Coverage Book. It's a superb tool. It does cost money, but the lowest tier, it's $99 a month. So it's within the reach of many people, but it is absolutely packed full of metrics on estimated unique views of the coverage you've got. It gives you the backlinks. It'll give you the domain authority of the site that you've been on, which is also a really important SEO indicator. Branded search, things like Google Trends, what people are typing in on Google, how people are finding you is really important. If people type in aspects of your brand, if they type something in after you run a campaign that they're looking for now because there isn't a link through to it. Search visibility, even traffic to specific piece of content, your blog, a survey, if you've announced a piece of research and you've got a link back to the page, or you've just put it on LinkedIn, you wonder how many people are visiting the page. Or if you've gated that content, which we don't do for numerous reasons I can or can't go into here, or will or won't, then you can look at how many people have filled in forms. So there's a wealth of metrics out there that would fall into the feel good bucket. The next bucket is what are called business outcomes, right? And they're actually the things that matter. They're the things that are saying, did all these things in the feel good metrics contribute towards our business outcomes, things that grow our company, right? And typically business outcomes are things like leads, things called marketing qualified leads. So marketing qualified lead, oh God, don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole.
No,
marketing qualified lead. If you're using a platform like HubSpot or SharpSpring that we used to use, you can actually lead score people according to how they interact with content on your website. So what they do, these tools do, is you say, right, if someone downloads a white paper, I'm going to give them 5 points. If they visit our website more than twice, I'm going to give them these points. Or every time they visit our website, I'm going to give them this. And over time, they'll accumulate lead score. And then at a certain threshold, like 100 points, you'll go, right, they are really engaged with us. They are MQL. They're a marketing qualified lead. And then you can even set it to ding your salespeople to go, this person loves us. They really ingest a load of our content. Get in touch with them now. So that's a marketing qualified lead. Sales qualified leads are ones that salespeople have met at an event or have come in and they've spoken to them. And then obviously things like increased revenues and shortened sales cycles. So these are all things that actually around, okay, how did the people get to us? And then how many of those people actually turned into a piece of business? I think the thing to state though is, because earlier I said there's an omni-channel approach, McKinsey have typically said, I think, correct me on this one if I'm wrong, Max, McKinsey have said that I think the average person now needs between like 6 and 10 interactions or exposure to your brand before they'll even really do anything. So that's why we're very hot on our clients doing newsletters, podcasts, webinars, LinkedIn, media, obviously, and generating content, doing reports and all those things, because then you've got lots and lots of chances for your content to appear in lots of different places. So it's really good content, and then getting it seeded into lots of channels, and then tracking the effectiveness of those channels that then will drive leads to your website. But if you don't have something like HubSpot, it's much more difficult for you to identify individuals who are very engaged with your with your content. It's just quite tough. And that's why people gate content, because once someone's left their email address, it basically starts tracking them that point forward. But we don't gate content, which may sound like a paradox. That's something we choose not to do, but a lot do it because then it will drive people, to start being tracked. And hopefully you won't start hit by those annoying, heavily automated spam email campaigns. That can get really annoying. That's a very long answer to your question on sort of good. It's all good data. It's just data that's got to be linked together.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And I suppose that if you don't have those back end elements like a HubSpot or something to actually enable you to track those things, I guess the hope is that by doing things properly, you might not be able to measure them to the same level as a company that has those elements involved, but you can at least know that you're following a philosophy that has genuine value and impact into what you're doing. So definitely. So I guess going down, like digging in a tiny bit deeper around that, is the kind of metrics that should really drive the marketing strategy. But I think also a huge part of this is about the how they might change during specific activity. Because I know you've gone through a lot of the types of metrics, but how that might be changing as your marketing activity changes and pivots.
Well, that's a good question. I think you have to have a set of baseline metrics, but obviously there are just events that happen less frequently than others, right? You've just got ongoing things like website visits and ongoing PR, but then you're going to get one-off activations that you do, right? So you've just got to make sure they're set up to be tracked as well. So just an example of that is you're not going to have capacity to do a big report all the time, right? So if you do 3 reports a year, you've got to be able to track that and then figure out, okay, well, I put snippets of it in LinkedIn, and then I'm going to have to work out how many people came from LinkedIn back to my website to get the report, and how many people came in. I mean, to do that, right, you can use something. It's all about attribution. So that's when you can use something called a UTM, it stands for Urchin Tracking Module. And it's basically a little snippet you put on a URL that identifies a uniqueness of a visitor from a particular campaign. You can make it as hideously complex as light as you want. So just an example, you can put UTM codes on your links within LinkedIn posts, right? So you could just say at top level, okay, these are people that came from LinkedIn, or you could get quite granular and say, well, these are people that came from LinkedIn when we promoted this particular content. And if you want to get really granular, it can be, these are people that came from LinkedIn with this particular piece of content that we promoted on this particular day. And you can just go mad. But if you've got something like Bitly, Bitly's got an inbuilt UTM builder in it. So that, I think, I haven't used it, but from what I've read and heard, it seems to be a good thing, because it can be quite intimidating if you start trying to put UTM links yourself into it. You can go and learn all about it, and then you have to sort of then start plugging it into Google Analytics as well. But Bitly certainly is a tool that can help people with that. But yeah, like obviously going to events is another one. We go to a lot of events, but we always try and have attribution for events. So typically, we've got Pipedrive that we use for sales leads, and then we will or anyone who's got a CRM or like HubSpot or anything like that, they'll enter the system, and the attribution will be, oh, I met them at this event. And then, once again, if your lead score tracking them, they might be on email list. You might start sending them bits of content. You'll start seeing how they engage with things. But that's broadly, I think, you can have consistent metrics a lot of the time that are just ongoing with activity. And then there's one-off big activations like events or reports and things like that just will require extra tracking and extra thought as to how they're being attributed and tracked.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting as well, is that the ability to have something consistent like a Bitly link or UTM link on your content, and then that still exists even if you're just looking at the LinkedIn analytics, or if you're just looking at like the coverage numbers. There's going to be hopefully a Bitly link or UTM link connected to that keeps that consistent all the way through.
Yeah. I mean, just to add, I mean, I think the thing that could intimidate people listening is you can end up with a lot of dashboards, right? You could end up with having to look at Google Analytics, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, Bitly. Really, really big companies will have their own software people pulling data into dashboards, and there are services out there which will often be plugged into these services to bring the analytics through. But it can be intimidating to have to look at different dashboards every month, and then especially if you have to create a report out of it to back to someone, whether an agency or a marketing manager in an organization, it can feel slightly intimidating. I accept that.
Yeah, I suppose like when this kind of leads on to the next question as well, is about for games companies the metrics that might be specific to our industry, bearing in mind that they might not necessarily be the big companies that might have all these multiple platforms and dashboards, and might need something a bit more bespoke to their immediate needs and like business objectives.
So I think when it comes to really traditional B2B marketing, the answer is it's the same. It's universal. I don't see anything that we would do for the video games industry that someone couldn't do within security, pet food, or I don't know, whatever else. Pet food's consumers, that's a bad example. But any B2B solution in terms of tracking and measurement is effectively based on the same principles. I feel like they're universal. And then within the games industry, where I see tracking specific to games that we wouldn't get involved with much as an agency, but may apply to people listening to this, is one is going to be specific to mobile games, and that's obviously the hideous complexity around user acquisition campaigns, and there are endless platforms and in-house people that just spend their lives doing user acquisition. But I would draw the distinction that those are paid campaigns. Normally for what we do and what we're talking about today, there will be paid stuff, of course there is, but a lot of what we do would fall into sort of the earned bucket, things that we're not paying to be there. But that said, I think mobile with user acquisition is enormous, and there's hideously complex metrics on daily active users, ARPU, and all kinds of stuff that I don't need to go into now. At the other side of it is the consumer side of games, and really that's very Steam centric. I know obviously people who are on consoles can probably get analytics as well, but there are just an example, like Steam Data Suite got bought by Newzoo, right? They track Steam analytics, and so I think for a lot of our clients on the consumer side, we're trying to get more data driven with things like wish lists, right? So like, did this piece of coverage drive wish list numbers? Did it drive up visitors to your Steam page? What's the average conversion someone visiting your Steam page to actually becoming a wish list person? Because that may then require page optimization, right? With the copy, screenshots, video, what have you. So I think Steam definitely gives access to some really good insight and analytics that people can use around campaigns that we've done, because we've got our consumer division as well, not just B2B, where we're getting much more involved in trying to understand the immediate metrics around a campaign. And obviously, with influencers as well, you can they can have unique codes. If someone's paying an influencer to do something, there'll be tracking built into that campaign with codes they'll give out to have for a redemption or money off or something like that.
It's really interesting though, going back to the B2B side though, on that, there is, I think there's often a lot of conversations we have is that, the games industry works a bit different, especially if we're working with people who aren't, dyed in the wool games industry people in the B2B world. They might have come from
Yeah.
a tech background. We have that conversation a lot, saying it's the games industry is a bit different, but it is good to know and satisfying to know that like the measurement side isn't something that's different within the games industry when it comes to B2B, and it's very much consistent with what others might have experienced in other industry, other B2B like verticals as well.
Yeah. I mean, all the like that the measurement course, the Ginny Dietrich one that I spoke about, that's entirely applicable to a campaign. Anyone who's selling a product to another person, another company, it's universal principles.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is often, I think when we get to this point, we feel like there's a lot of really good value that we've highlighted here about what measurement can do, especially if it's really integrated within the other parts of the business. You can really track things, know what's working, know what isn't. But there is a big question that we don't do it to the full extent that we would perhaps do on every single client. Not all clients will be wanting this, and often it's down to the amount of time that goes into that. And so there is often people who would want this evaluation side of things, but if this is counted against actual deliverables in terms of outreach or content development, it can feel like an awful lot of working is just on the measurement and not on the doing. So first of all, what are your thoughts on that? But second of all, is there a way of streamlining it for people who might not be able to afford the full blown offering there?
Yeah, and I think we see it ourselves. It's a huge time suck. If you do really fully full fat analytics, attribution, and measurement, it's most of our clients probably wouldn't pay for the whole shebang, quite honestly. So we're doing a light version some of the time, or lots of the time for people. So look, I totally accept. As I said earlier, it can be a lot. It can be intimidating. I think that the metrics that are going to be valuable, certainly for media coverage. I'm not in their pay, by the way, but Coverage Book is just really great. It's just, we've used it for years. I'd love Gary, if he listens to this, to put me on a commission structure, if you're listening, Gary. But it really is just a fantastic tool. They've just released a new tool called Coverage Impact, which is free, where you can actually map Google search trends against your media coverage to literally see if there is an uptick in branded search against pieces of PR, and a lot of people are getting stuff from it. I think the problem is if you're in a really niche area, sometimes Google Trends just doesn't register at a certain level, and that's a limitation with Google Trends. I've gone on quite a lot and looked for. We've got really good coverage for clients, and then I've kind of gone to Google Trends, and it doesn't register a blip, and not because our clients are irrelevant. It's just because our clients, they're not. It's just not enough volume to register. Yeah. So that's like a massive thing. The single most important metric for me, I spoke about it earlier, is probably backlinks, high quality backlinks. I've certainly seen the most impressive metric from what we've done with clients from a PR perspective is, as most people listeners may or may not know, SEO is good. SEO is predicated upon you getting backlinks from a high domain authority DA websites, and the high domain authority website are going to be the big news sites. A lot of people go to them, they spend a lot of time on them, they visit them repeatedly. Those sites, so let's just take an example, the ones I mentioned, the games industry, gi.biz, GamesBeat, they'll have a score, right? A domain authority score, which you can get from something like, you go to moz.com, there's a Moz bar you can install, or you can just get the domain authority of any site you're looking at. If you land a piece of coverage with one of those sites, if you get a backlink, that's a massive indicator to Google that your website is worth visiting, and that will push you higher in the search engine results. Now, the problem is you can't always get a backlink, or it's very hard to get a backlink from a lot of these sites. The one tried and tested thing that I have seen to get a backlink from these sites almost without fail is if you have a really good report, when we pitch in the report and we host the report, or the client hosts the report on their website, or we've done it ourselves, we host it on our website, we give a précis or an overview of the report, the top level takeaways, but there will be a link back to our site for readers to download the full report. And that's really the one time legitimately where you will very likely be able to get a high domain authority website in the games industry and other places to actually link back to the page where you're hosting that piece of content. It's the single best thing, and that's going to have a direct benefit to you of pushing you up the rankings. So using something like Ubersuggest, we can you could or SERPstat, or any of these tools, SEMrush, not SERPstat, sorry, SEMrush. You can look at how many backlinks over time you've got to your site and the quality of those backlinks. And I've seen it time and time again. As we started working with a client, we will see good quality media coverage from good quality websites. We'll hopefully get backlinks or mentions, and then I absolutely see a clear inflection point where, when we started working with them, it's continuously risen the amount of high quality backlinks that they've been getting. So I think that's a really fantastic starting point for anyone from a media perspective, media coverage perspective. But like I said, there's lots of other baseline metrics that can be tracked. Web visits, search, how many people are actually searching for you. You can go on to Google Webmaster Tools and look at specifics of what people have been typing in, or which articles, which piece of content are driving the most people back to your website as well. And also, once we go into those business outcomes, if you're gating content using a form, whatever it is, there's plenty of ways you can get inexpensive form builders. We use Pipedrive for our one, but MailChimp have got a really good form builder. MailChimp's inexpensive. How many people have filled in a form for a particular piece of content? For example, that's a good one. How many downloads did you have of that piece of content? Is another good one.
Yeah, I'd also
how
add
many listeners to your podcast? How many downloads?
Oh yeah, that information's not going to be shared yet. But no, I'd say with the report is interesting, because also with something like LinkedIn, giving a shout out to Tamsin and the team there, is that with doing a report via LinkedIn and using that process and sponsoring it, you have an autofill function, so it streamlines that process of people actually putting their information in, because as a user on LinkedIn downloading the report via LinkedIn autofills their information, so it gives you that streamlined approach that hopefully opens up more opportunities as well. I would also say, adding to what you're saying, and also throwing it out also to that broader conversation of, like, I suppose in terms of what's possible within a client agency relationship, it's about setting out, in some of the in a lot of agencies, okay, like, what good looks like, what does good look like for you? But ultimately, I think we're a bit more practical in this. It's about creating that framework that works between the agency and the client and the budget available. And that framework might be very specific data points. It might not be the best data points, but it's data points that will keep everyone kind of agreeing that it's going in the right direction. It's kind of a conversation, you say.
And also, the other trick is, and if you're client side, I'd urge you to think about this, is clients just don't share basic information or give us access sometimes, right? They're not going to won't tell you revenues. They're not. I've seen time and time again, the marketing PR people just don't talk to the sales people. They don't join the dots. So they're not saying to each other, okay, well, I've done this campaign. How many leads did it lead to? It's using that, HubSpot or another automation system like SharpSpring or whatever it is, or Active Campaign that we also used to use. So it's getting access to that. And, you can ask clients for access to Google Analytics, right? They can add you, and I've had clients do that. So you can go and inquire as to the data. And then there's other things we can get, but there's just some things we can't get as an agency that the client has to choose to divulge or share access to a tool. But it's that joining the dots once again that we seek to do, that we have to make the case for the client, because they're not always aware they're not always aware of that.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting point, because I think most people, maybe not on the data side, but I think most people who've worked in agencies or worked in marketing will often have that nice, pleasant surprise of getting a nice win for the client. It might be an interview, it might be a piece of coverage, it might be a really good report, and then like months later, they might be speaking to the CEO or someone
Yeah,
senior in the company, and oh, I really liked that, I really valued that, but you're not kind of aware in the moment that that piece of work
yeah,
it's not even just got good data points, but just resonated really well within the client side, within
yeah.
the company that you're doing it for as well.
I think you raise a really good point, actually, Max. Is that, you know, we always say to people, you've got to give things at least 6 months to see if they're working. Yeah, like, because a lot of clients are scared to commit for elongated periods of time, but you've got to give it 6 months. And I think the example you said was a fantastic one. You know, I've seen it myself. We've created an amazing report for a client, and 6 months, 12 months later, they're still getting immense use out of it, immense value out of it, you know, whether it's search engine results or using it as a lead gen tool when their salespeople get in touch with someone, hey, check out this report we made, you know, which positions them as a thought leader, or physically printing it and actually going to a show and handing it out at the show and giving it to people. Or, you know, we put a thing on our desk with a QR code saying download our latest report here, and you can then measure, you know, how many people have clicked through. So I think it's a good one that these B2B is just a long game. It just is. So I think the short-term satisfaction of going, oh, can I just get some press coverage in the next 3 months? Yeah, but I think when you get into more substantial stuff like reports, content, newsletters, and really digging into subscriber numbers and where your audience are after 6 months to a year, that's really where the measurement comes in. And a huge amount of companies are probably punishing their agencies. And I don't say this to be self-serving. They're punishing agencies because they just haven't really given thought to the long-term metrics and value of the collateral and the content that they're creating, and the fact things like newsletters and podcasts and just take time to build up audiences. It's not an immediate thing.
Yeah, and I think actually it's a really interesting point tied to that, is that in the industry that we work in, and B2B being even smaller slice of the games industry, like you actually have opportunities for a lot of B2B companies out there to have a mainstay point within the market. It's very common that in a new market space, you release some data or you release an opinion or some analysis, and that's just
Mm,
recycled and reused because it's still like
yeah,
a burgeoning landscape. And you see that a lot with the same data points being used in reference to the same things going on in the industry, because no one else is sharing more updated data. No one else is doing that analysis.
yeah,
So it's just referring back to a piece of work, going to your point about something that 12 months down the line, it's still useful, it's still
yeah.
delivering for you beyond that like coverage hit that you might have got when you release the report or whatever it is.
And and you still can't even capture all the places that you may be getting value from, which is frustrating. You know, case in point, last year and this year, we put out our journalist insight survey, and anecdotally, someone from another PR agency when I was at GDC told me that it got quoted a talk there. I would have never known that. I wasn't in that talk, but it's incredible that our report and our data was cited by somebody who'd read it and then put it into a conference session. So you can have some weird and wonderful ways that things manifest, and they're not trackable, those things.
Yeah.
So they may sound self-defeating, but ho ho, hey ho.
No, I think it's true. There is a limit of what you can do, and there are certainly very very many ways that can limit you, whether it's budget, whether it's just things that you can't track. And so I think we've got 10 minutes left, and I thought actually to round off
Mm,
this call, it's giving you almost a quick fire round of the tools available and the tools that we were speaking about. I know we've referenced
mm,
a few, but I think this question comes about what key
mm.
tools should I be considering? What can I do on a budget? And I know that when we were talking about this ahead of time, you know, you had quite a long list to go through. So I feel free to do a kind
No,
of
I don't
quick.
want to worry. It's not a lot. It's definitely not a long list, and I've mentioned a lot of them, and we'll put them all in the links underneath the video. But yeah, I'm gonna have a look down here just because I've got my list that I jotted stuff down. But generally, like I said, there's free and then there's paid.
Mm.
Free tools, some of the free tools I would put would be, I've mentioned it, Google Analytics. Anyone can get that, but Google Analytics can be quite intimidating, but it does have an AI component now where you can go and ask it questions, so it's a lot better than it was. Google Search Console is its sort of little known underloved sibling, but can be a really nice succinct way of getting insight into like which pages of your site are popular, what people are typing in, how people are finding you. It's a really good one that is less intimidating than Google Analytics. Uber Suggest as well, I said earlier, it's got a free tier, but I got Uber Suggest on its like forever license for like $200 or something, and it's the best kind. I think, you know, that I've used SEMrush in the past, but that's fairly expensive. Amazing, loads of people use it. Not a bad tool, but for the average person, it may be overkill. It may be too expensive. Whereas Uber Suggest can just be better for entry level people. Coverage Impact I've mentioned from Coverage Book. It's free. I check it out. You can actually correlate media coverage, and they've taken more media sources now and places that you can input data with things like Google Trends, and so that's a really nice valiant effort by those guys to correlate media coverage with search and people actually doing something. Obviously LinkedIn, you know, we pretty much most of B2B are active on LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn. We do it for ourselves, we do it for clients. Tamsin, obviously, who's mentioned here but not seen, the hidden hand and power behind these things. She's obviously using the analytics. In fact, last week I just played with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT's got a dedicated data insight tool that you can actually, that little known inside ChatGPT, there's like a marketplace. Yeah. And if you're a premium subscriber, which is like 20 quid a month, which I am, you can actually go into the marketplace, and there's tools that are being developed by third parties and tools from ChatGPT themselves. And one of them is a data analytics tool. And you can actually activate it and upload a spreadsheet, and you can put loads of LinkedIn data and generate really amazing insight for like over any given period of time using it. It's really impressive, and I found that last week. Buffer's a good one. Buffer's what we use to schedule social media posts. That's got analytics in it. That's got a free tool, so if you're doing social media, Buffer's a good one. And Bitly, mentioned that as well. I think Bitly's got a free tier as well. Using Bitly links is really good for campaigns, like, because it'll actually give you metrics, like how many people clicked on that link. Like, it's really valuable. And like I said, you've got the UTM builder as well, which I think is a bit of a level above a regular Bitly link. But I would certainly be investigating a lot of them as free tools. When you've got paid tools, once again, they're different levels of affordability, right? So like Muckrack, which is what we use at the moment, that's got really good reporting analytics for media coverage. Max, you spent a lot of time in it recently for client analysis.
I love it.
Very good. Gives you sentiment analysis, gives you, you know, Meltwater is another one that does very similar, and Cision. There's a few of them out there that PR agencies will be using. But will give you good insight as to like sentiment, where people are coming from, spikes in coverage, and stuff like that. Coverage Book, I'm not going to mention anymore because I feel like it's going to get suspicious otherwise. But it is paid, but it is just it's so chock full of metrics. I don't think people use it know how many metrics are in there unless they start digging into it. But it's the really valiant effort by those guys to make analytics more integrated part of media coverage and more meaningful. I've already spoken about Uber Suggest, and they've got their premium tier. And then really the last one that I think will be beyond the reach for a lot of people will be what I've spoken about, are these CRM sort of stroke marketing automation systems. I mean, HubSpot's the best known. It can get expensive. A lot of people start off on HubSpot's free CRM, but really if you want the sort of detailed attribution, automated mailing, automated lots of things, and you're going to have to start paying for it. I mean, certainly we used Active Campaign, which is more affordable. I used to use another system called Sharp Spring that got bought not that long ago. Really, if you want to join the dots, really join the dots on actual individuals who are visiting your website and engaging with your content, you're only going to do that by having one of these systems in place and actually lead scoring them and saying, for whenever they do X, I'm going to score them Y. And whenever the score goes over a certain amount, I will consider them to be a hot sales lead, a marketing qualified lead. Then, as I said, you can even set the system up to ping your sales team. And that's where that conversation hasn't really happened between sales and marketing, that when you've got one of these automation sort of CRM systems, it should be the marketing people sitting with the sales people going, right, what are the criteria we want? What do we consider to be a hot lead? You know, we've got this campaign going out. And so that's just failing quite badly. I've never seen it done well, either people having that system in place or sales and marketing talking to each other. It's not to say it isn't being done, it's not always being done well. But that's why we don't do it, but people will have, you know, HubSpot approved agencies that literally will run HubSpot for them and create content for them, and they'll do a lot of the measurements there. Not do ourselves out of a job, but if people want HubSpot or these more complex, more expensive systems, there are agencies that are certified that will go out and run that for clients. And so, yeah, really, that's my final bit of the paid aspect.
That's really true. And just going back to Muck Rack, I would also say it's the measurement side also goes on to how you can look at your competitor marketplace as well. We didn't really touch on that. Maybe that's another freemium mode for another time, but it's a huge value in terms of seeing what others are doing in the market, how others are faring, and benchmarking yourself in that way, which I guess falls.
I mean, yeah, that's a really good one, actually, is analytics. You know, we don't want to run over time, but you're absolutely right, Max, is trackable analytics can apply to you just in your competitivity. Yeah. It's not necessarily just everything you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a really important part of it, which I do think that's an inspiration for another episode at another time. But as James said, we are wrapping up nicely. And thank you so much, James, for taking the time out and to actually speak about this.
Pleasure.
For everyone who's commented and who's shared their thoughts and who has been watching, thank you again. Obviously, this will be put up on YouTube afterwards as well. So for anyone to look back in terms of posterity, you can do that as well. My usual spiel at the end of this. So if you are keen for more BGM stuff, we've obviously got our other social platforms, X and TikTok. Both of them are at Big Games Machine. Obviously, we're on LinkedIn now, so feel free to drop us a follow if you haven't done that already. If you're wanting more insight, we've got a lot of other stuff available to you. James referred to some reports. Those are housed on our website. We regularly reshare them on our social channels just in case people have missed out on them. So make sure to look at those. But additionally, we have a few newsletters. We've got 3. One of them is a daily newsletter, the daily download. You get that via your email. If that's a bit too much for you, you can get the LinkedIn one, which is released every Friday morning and gives you a digest of the main stories of the preceding week, which can be incredibly helpful. I know a lot of people have enjoyed that. And we also now do a monthly trends analysis newsletter, which shows you the changing trends in the games industry, what's going up, what's going down, and what's caused those changes as well. I'd also say make sure to follow us. We have a regular news, insights, and articles that are coming out on our site, as well as our LinkedIn as well. So you will be spoilt for choice when it comes to seeing what we can do. And be rest assured, we are tracking and analysing them to the best of our ability as well. We are practicing what we preach. So with that, without further ado, thank you so much for joining. James, thank you so much. And until next time, this has been Freemium Mode. Have a lovely month.